Welcome back to No Wooden Nickels, people. What's happening? Hey, tonight's video, man, is gonna be based on the differences between a de jure constitutional government as opposed to a de facto government based entirely on franchises. Reason why I'm doing this video is because there are a few individuals that I know could benefit from the video I'm about to present to y'all. Again, this is all relative to one of my mission statements for this channel, and that is spreading knowledge of not only the truth, but our rights and how to properly enforce them, as well as doing the research prerequisite to being able to enforce said rights. Excuse me. All right, so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get the disclaimer out of the way, and then I'll go ahead and start laying out this video. All right, so my content is for educational purposes only. Can't stress enough for you guys to do your own research. Appraise my content, throw any errors you find in the comments. None of us have been alive long enough to know all that transpired in the past, and none of us can live long enough to know all there is to learn. Now, before I get into this, I'm just gonna let y'all know right now, man, if you happen to be an individual that wants everything done for or handed to you, you might want to bypass this. Excuse me. Because, you know, when it comes to what I'm about to talk about, or any video that I speak about as it relates to your rights, you know, in certain points and aspects of law, it ain't no room for the lazy folk, because somebody can do all the stuff for you, but when it come time for you to represent it, you're not going to be able to do it if you ain't doing the legwork, the research and the studying, you know, the committing certain things to memory, you know, and etc., just things of that nature. So, all right, first I'm going to read off just like a chart that describes a characteristic, and then how that characteristic will be dealt with under a de jure constitutional government, and then how things are dealt with under the de facto government that we're under now, based entirely off of franchises. So, the first characteristic is the purpose of government. Under a de jure constitutional government, it's based on protection. Under the type of government we're subjugated to now, de facto, is to provide social services and social insurance to government employees and officers. Number two, characteristic, nature of government. Under de jure constitutional government, it's public trust and charitable trust. What we're under now is for-profit private corporation. See 28 United States Code, subsection 3002, 15A. That's another thing, people. I'm gonna be mentioning things that you can look up, gain a deeper and broader understanding of. Also, educate yourself. Also to know, lastly, that it's just not me talking and wanting you to see things my way. You do with this information what you will. If it doesn't resonate for you, or if you don't feel as though this information is pertinent, then feel free to click off, man. I got 180 some odd other videos you can look at if that's what you choose to do. If not, then busy yourself doing something else. Third characteristic is citizens. Under the Jure constitutional government, it's the sovereigns, nationals, but not citizens, pursuant to 8 United States Code subsection 110A21. Under a de facto government based entirely upon franchises, it would be employees or officers of the government, trustees of the public trust, customers of the corporation, statutory United States citizens pursuant to 8 United States Code subsection 1401. Fourth characteristic, effective domicile of citizens. De jure, sovereign states of the Union. De facto, federal territory in the District of Columbia. Fifth characteristic, ownership of real property is, under the Jure government, legal. Under a de facto government, equitable. The government owns the land and you rent it from them using property taxes. If you guys want to know when, how it took place, History 101, 1 through 6. I forget which one it's in, but very informative series of videos relative to the history of government. Moving on. Number 6, type of property ownership. Under the jure constitutional government, it's absolute and allodial. I want y'all to look that word up, allodial. That means no property tax. You own it once you've tendered the debt. Under de facto government, it's qualified, shared with government, owned by the public office, and managed by the person volunteering into the office. I posted something on Facebook today relevant to when Barack Obama was the president. His the speech he gave in 2014 when he was about to get out the White House, and he spoke about citizens being in office, i.e., public officer, public office. If you look up those terms, you will understand the ramifications it has. So some of that stuff is relative to what I'm reading to you guys now. Just wanted to point that out. Yeah, and cheers to y'all. Yeah. Been a while. I've been going hard, balancing out a whole bunch of things, multitasking in the universe of diverse studies. I'm gonna go on and enjoy me a little sip. But cheers to y'all. Hope y'all safe and prospering. Anyway, back to it. All right, just want to make sure I was still on. Um, Meaning of word rights. That's number 7. De jure, it means constitutional rights. De facto, it means statutory privileges under a civil franchise. Constitutional rights don't exist and are irrelevant. I'm going to read that one again for y'all. Number 7, the characteristic is the meaning of the word rights. Under a de jure constitutional government, it means constitutional rights. Under a de facto government based entirely upon franchises, it means statutory privileges. We are now under statutory. They are now operating under statutory law. Before that, it was public policy. Before that, it was public law. Again, I have this information in prior videos. Number 8, purpose of tax system. Under de jure constitutional government is to fund protection. To fund protection. Under de facto government, it means socialism, political favors, wealth redistribution, consolidation of power and control, corporate fascism, means to bribe private people to join the franchise and become public officers collecting benefits. A lot of these words and terms, you may look at them as what you've always known them to mean, but again, in law, they have an entirely different meaning. Number 9, equal protection. Under de jure constitution is mandatory. Under de facto government is optional. Number 10, nature of courts. De jure, constitutional Article 3 courts in the judicial branch. De facto, administrative or franchise courts within the executive branch. Number 11, branches within the government. De jure, executive, legislative, and judicial. De facto, executive, legislative, judiciary merged with executive. See Judicial Code of 1911. Again, it references the Judicial Code of 1911. Number 12, purpose of legal profession. De jure, protect individual rights. De facto, protect collective government rights. Protect and expand the government monopoly. 3, discourage reforms by making litigation so expensive that it is beyond the reach of the average citizen, and to persecute dissent. 13, lawyers are, under de jure government, unlicensed. Under de facto government, privileged and licensed, therefore subject to control and censorship by the government. Okay. Yeah, when you get benefits, they come with something. Anyway, number 14, votes in elections cast by, under de jure government, electors. Under de facto government, franchisees, called registered voters, who are surety for bond measures on the ballot. That means they are subject to a poll tax. Driving is, under de jure government, a common right. Under de facto government, a licensed privilege. Marriage under de jure constitutional government is a common right. Under de facto government, based entirely on franchises, is a licensed privilege. Here's a big one. Money is based on gold and silver issued pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of the Constitution, that is. That's under de jure constitutional government. De facto government means a corporate bond or obligation borrowed from the Federal Reserve at interest. Also issued pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2. Mind you, there were more than one constitution, 19, purpose of sex. Under de jure constitutional government, procreation. Under de facto government based entirely on franchises, recreation. Number 20, responsibility. Under de jure constitutional government, the individual sovereign is responsible for all his actions and choices. Under de facto, the collective social insurance company is responsible. Personal responsibility is outlawed. 21, meaning of state, comma, this state. Under de jure government, it's a body politic and not a body corporate. Under de facto government, it's a body corporate and not body politic. There is no body politic and everyone is presumed to be part of the body corporate as a public officer. 22, meaning of in this state or in the state in statutes. Under de jure government, it means physically present within the geographical limits of the territory composing the state. Under de facto government, legally and not physically present within the corporation as a person and therefore public officer of the corporation. 23, real party and interest in criminal actions filed by the state. Under de jure government means specific human being injured who is within the body politic, pardon me. Under de facto government, it means private corporation called state of. Most actions are penal or quasi-criminal rather than criminal in a classical sense. Such penal actions can only be associated with franchisees under a civil franchise. Okay. All right. Basically, what's been done is, we started out, if you reflect back to elementary school, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, not democracy. And they had already changed it from a republic to a democracy when I was in elementary school. The shit had already taken place. You see what I'm saying? So they changed it from a republic into a democracy and then into a monarchy. Again, I'm reading from a document. This is not based upon my research. However, I read from this document that I'm reading from because it references law. I've been dealing with, these types of documents since 2010, 2011. And they have yet to mislead me, so I share it with you guys, for those who are like myself and just want to be left the fuck alone. I don't need nobody's protection. I can handle myself. All right, the main characteristics of all monarchies are: the king owns all land by divine right. Okay. Number 2, everyone who calls themselves a citizen is subject to the king, whether they want to be or not. Number 3, you need permission from the king to expatriate or cease to be a subject. Nearly all services and protections offered by the king are implemented as civil franchisees. Number 5, the society is a caste society in which no one is equal. Subjects are at the bottom. Then you have dukes, earls, lords, etc. Then you have the king at the top. See, that's relative to certain past societies that they drew upon to erect the current society we now live in. If you know, you know. All right, civil franchisees are the main method of implementing the above in an otherwise egalitarian society. Social Security and the Federal Reserve are the linchpin of the transformation, and they begin in 1935 and 1913, respectively. The following subsections will describe how the legal rule for transforming a de jure republic into a de facto democracy, then monarchy. We covered some of the history of how this was done earlier in this document. An understanding of this is important because you can't undo until you understand how it was done in the first place. Sidebar. If you are at a loss as far as it goes for understanding how things got to be the way they are, then how do you expect to take your rightful place and position back? Or I could say it another way, based on the fact that we're under maritime admiralty law, which is essentially the law of the sea. And in law, you've been relegated from a creation of God or the Creator, whatever the case. You've been relegated to that of a vessel via the law of the sea. And when you're not in control of your vessel, then you're considered lost at sea, and they can board your vessel and take your possessions at will. The straw man is the conduit they use to gain access to the body. Mainly because they never told us that the all caps representation of our name is a corporate person. No different than if you created a business, erected a business. And that unless you rebut the presumption that you are a corporate person, then it stands in law. And they're able to utilize the same to gain access to the body to compel you to perform based upon you being a subject of the corporate United States. Hey, accept it or reject it. Whatever you do is fine with me. Okay. Excuse me. Hello. Okay, just want to make sure I'm still here. The legal definition of de jure is as follows: descriptive of a condition in which there has been total compliance with all requirements of law, of right, legitimate, lawful, by right, and just title. In this sense, it is the contrary of de facto. It may also be contrasted with de gratia. Excuse me. In which case, it means as a matter of right, as de gratia means by grace or favor. Again, it may be contrasted with equitable, here meaning by law, as the latter means by equity. Black Laws Dictionary, 6th edition, page 425. The definition above hints as the true origin of the word de jure, which in fact is that the requirement for consent of the government mandated by the Declaration of Independence is respected at every level by every officer and employee of the government. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. By the consent of the governed. Any authority claimed by a real de jure government actor that cannot trace or is not required to trace its civil authority back to the express written consent of the people is inherently unjust and therefore no longer de jure. We covered this in the previous section. All laws enacted by the government are enacted by representatives of the people exercising delegated authority of the people collectively. These requirements are empowered by our act of voting to consent on our behalf as a collective to the enactment of enactment of civil and criminal laws intended to protect us. When more than 51% of our representatives consent to the passage of a bill or law, it then is enacted into law and thereby requires the force and effect of law. Hence, a majority vote is an expression of the collective consent of the people through their elected representatives. When we say consent of the people, we really mean consent of the constitutional citizens only in the exercise of their right to vote, and not all people. Citizens are only a subject of the whole people, and constitutional aliens or resident aliens are not allowed to vote. Obviously, when we say that consent of the governed is mandatory, we can only mean for the purposes of civil and not criminal law or law enforcement. Unlike the civil statutory law, the consent of a criminal is not required in order to enforce the criminal laws against him or her. The reason why a criminal cannot be compelled without their consent is that they have deprived another of a protected equal right and therefore lose their equal rights. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. If men fought and hurt a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no harm follows, she shall surely be punished. He shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman's husband imposes on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And that comes out of Exodus chapter 21, verses 21 through 25. Yeah, that's another thing that y'all might not know. They use a lot of the Bible in their laws. Anyway, moving on. The above is a fulfillment of a greater commandment given supposedly by Jesus, which is the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. If you hurt people, then indirectly you are asking to be hurt and consenting to be hurt in return. This, in fact, is a basic principle of equity in general. Okay. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Whatever. This document is associated with Christianity. I'm not, gonna get into that. I'm just, I'm gonna focus on the law. It just so happens that the law is wrapped up in that. That's all. The civil law is, in turn, a product of our individual consent. It is implemented as both private law and what the U.S. Supreme Court calls a compact. In Europe, the executive is synonymous with the sovereign power of a state, where it is where it is too commonly acquired by force or fraud or both. In America, however, the case is widely different. Our government is founded upon compact, i.e. consent expressed in a written contract called a constitution, or in positive law. Sovereignty was and is in the people as individuals, and that's you. A compact, in turn, a contract which requires your consent. Compact, which is a noun. It's an agreement or contract between persons, nations, or states, commonly applied to working agreements between and among states concerning matters of mutual concern. A contract between parties which creates obligations and rights capable of being enforced and contemplated as such between the parties in their distinct and independent characters. A mutual consent of parties concerned respecting some property or right that is the object of the stipulation, or something that is to be done or forborne. See also compact clause, confederacy, interstate compact, treaty, Black Laws Dictionary, 6th edition, page 281. You can't be subject to the municipal civil laws of a specific jurisdiction without consenting by choosing a domicile within that specific civil jurisdiction and thereby becoming a protected person called a citizen or a resident. Domicile is an exercise of your First Amendment right of political and legal association. Therefore, you cannot be penalized using the provisions of the civil protection contract or social compact if you never consented to it. In such a case, which is the case of a non-resident or transient foreigner, the only laws that can be enforced are the common laws and not statutory civil law. This is further clarified in the following fascinating article. Mind you, there are no common law courts in the nation. So that would effectively put you outside of the jurisdiction of the United States, whereas though they cannot deal. You have to be a corporate person where your name appears in all capital letters and you have been made subject of the corporate United States. Meaning you haven't taken the time to learn the laws as they apply to your rights. So they own you, okay? And they own everything you own. You know, when you learn how the monetary system and the banking system works, it all ties in. That's the Federal Reserve. All right. The fascinating article that they speak of is titled, Why Domicile and Becoming a Taxpayer Require Your Consent, form number 05.002. Nations and states define themselves from foreigners and non-residents, meaning those who are not protected citizens and residents, using number 1, the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, otherwise termed FSIA, under 21 United States Code, Chapter 97, in the case of the federal government. Number 2, the long arm and non-resident statutes of your state. In the case of state governments, under the provisions of the 14th Amendment, you would like a list of such statutes for your state. Consult the authorities section for your state within the following and look for long arm statute. It's in the jurisdictions database litigation tool number 09.003. Then they have the same thing, jurisdiction database online. Litigation tool number 09.004. Okay. I'm going to read the last paragraph. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this one short. Yeah, I'm going on 40 minutes. I don't want to drag it out too long. The Jure Government, however, cannot do anything to a non-resident under the civil law that it would not do to its own case as principle of equity in the law of nations. The authority for invoking the FSIA or the long arm statute within your state derives from conducting commerce within the forum, which is called purposeful availment. Those who seek the benefit of protections of the laws of a jurisdiction they are doing business in are presumed in many cases to be, by the courts to have consented to the jurisdiction of said court when there is a dispute with a party within the forum or venue. Here is an example. I'm gonna stop there though. When I get back to it, I'll start from where I left off at. Anyway, man, again, these are just some examples of, what we've all been subjugated to by our government. And the only thing I can tell y'all is if the hardest part of anything is getting started. Once you start researching and uncovering the truth, as opposed to what you've been taught and trained to believe, I don't know, it may be different for you, but I know what it was for me. I know what it is for me. And I'm just at a point in my life I refuse to put the responsibility that I have in the hands of someone else who might not give a fuck about me. It's just another day in the office for them. They don't give a fuck about me. They don't give a fuck about you. If you're not family, or you're not tied in some kind of way, hey man, me myself, I don't wait, rely, or depend on things like that. I handle my business. Actually, that is the distinguishing factor of a minority and someone of the majority. It has nothing to do with your complexion, whether you got melanin, excuse me, whether you live in the inner city. It has everything to do with your mentality, your mind. If you're awarded a court, that means you're incompetent. You are incompetent and incapable of defending yourself. If you're a minority, that means that you are childlike in your mentality. So it's not for me to call or point no fingers. You assess yourself. Are you solely dependent upon the government? Are you able to, lace your boots up and handle your own business as a grown-ass man or woman? That ain't for me to decide. All I'm just saying is, it's information. It's information, it's things that this type of information they didn't teach you. They're not going to teach you. So like I said, do with it what you will. I'm going to go ahead, handle my business. Hopefully this has been informative. A lot of my videos you may need a dictionary for. Sorry, not sorry. Upgrade. Level up. Expound your vocabulary. It just is what it is. So with that, man, I'm going to sign off. Y'all be easy, stay safe, and dangerous if necessary. Peace.